compared to other countries' citizens simply because they are American. In keeping with the foundational lost perspective that this country belongs to them, native-born white Christians think of themselves as more American than anyone who
Live from the Stateless Patriot channel, this is Stateless Patriot. Hello, Deter. Welcome in. Here we go. Alright, for those of you rewatching this on the, I guess, posted post-stream, I guess you could say, today we are doing a reaction to the brand new video from American Wasp, aka Deter McBizness. The self-serving superficiality of conservative capitalist cognition. I love that title. It's very much reflective of, I guess you could say, the mindset. Going in and out. Let's see. Like for really, that'd be cool. Does it sound good now? Stops every few seconds. That's extremely lame. Good. Okay, if it starts acting up again, just let me know. Okay. Awesome. Yeah, no, I've been looking forward to more content from Deter for a while now. We've been talking to each other back and forth, and see here. Yeah, really respect this guy. Lots of respect for him. I think his content's quite brilliant, and I think a whole lot more people need to hear it, especially conservatives. If they were capable of actually listening, this would be this channel would be the channel I would want to direct them to, just to break down and deconstruct their entire existence. Their entire ideology or lack thereof. And I think his videos do a really great job of doing so. If you guys don't know, WASP stands for White Anglo-Saxon Protestant. And yeah, so this is you're very welcome, Deter. This is really appealing to me because it really is self-serving. Conservative values are very much superficial. They're not very focused on, I guess you could say, policy that actually uplifts people or isn't competitive for the sake of being competitive. I mean, that's capitalism for you. I mean, and conservatives serve capitalism. Anyway, without further ado, I think I've talked enough. Let's go ahead and get started. We got a 50-minute video here, so I have it sped up slightly, I think 1.3. Let's go ahead and get right into it.
We already know that, according to their understanding of the world, conservatives suffer from the self-delusion that they are exceptional when compared to other countries' citizens simply because they are American. In keeping with the foundational WASP perspective that this country belongs to them, native-born white Christians think of themselves as more American than anyone who isn't a native-born white Christian. According to Deter's drugstore psychology, they engage in this narcissistic patriotism, which is derivative of the quintessential WASP cultural quality of inauthentic, narcissistic social entitlement, because they are losers who want to feel like winners without having to risk anything, without having to do any of the work. Talk to any serious psychologist, and they will tell you that at the core of what drives narcissistic behavior and cognition is inadequacy. Welcome to the fourth foundational episode of American Wasp, where we all agree you don't get change in America by asking nicely. I am your host, Deter McBizness, New England's favorite white Anglo-Saxon Protestant gone West Coastal. Today, we are talking about the self-serving superficiality of conservative capitalist cognition. The obvious stereotype of MAGA Americans is that they are just stupid and or ignorant rednecks, right? Well, since their ignorance has and will implicitly speak for itself over the course of this delineation, let's focus on whether or not Trump conservatives are indeed stupid based on what we can decipher about how they formulate their most popular arguments. What is stupidity, though? Stupidity is not just an innate intellectual talent deficiency. Sometimes that's certainly the case. The synapses in someone's brain simply don't fire as quickly as they do for others. Stupidity is definitely a lot about natural intellectual talent, but I would argue more often than not, someone is thought of as stupid either because that person has not been conditioned to think enough, or also because of lack of conditioning, does not know how to think. Stupid citizens.
That's such exactly, and I see it way too much in day-to-day life. It's painful. But, like, what can you do?
Simply do not engage in the quantity of thought, nor the quality of thought necessary to understand society in any kind of sophisticated way. Quantity and quality of thought might come naturally for some, but for most, they derive from education, life experience, and an otherwise nurtured sense of curiosity. Regardless of how I define stupidity, the question, what is stupidity, begs the question, what is intelligence? The most sophisticated understanding of human intelligence is renowned psychologist Howard Gardner's theory of multiple intelligences, which includes 9 different elements of the human intellect.
Interesting.
Now, many of you might be raising your hand eagerly like you did in class so you can show everyone how smart you are by exclaiming, ooh, 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 is EQ one of them? Let's deal with this really quickly. EQ is a misnomer in a couple of ways, but the one that matters most, as you'll soon learn, is that there are multiple forms of emotional intelligence. Secondly, if EQ were a specific source of psychological study, the acronym would be EIQ for Emotional Intelligence Quotient, or SIQ for Social Intelligence Quotient.
This is why I really regret not taking psychology in high school, because this stuff actually really fascinates me.
I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure EQ has become nothing more than a corporate recruiting buzzword that means this applicant might not suck. Gardner's 9 include both expected and unexpected forms of intelligence. Interpersonal intelligence is how well we relate to others. Intrapersonal intelligence is how well we relate to ourselves. Self-concept, self-awareness. Logic and math constitute the same intelligence, and perhaps the easiest intelligence to evaluate. Verbal intelligence is how articulate someone is, as well as their ability to learn other languages. For the most part, MAGA conservatives, who aren't heartless one-percenters, suck at all 4 of those. Then there are what I like to call the dancers trio. Suck at all 4 of those. For the most part, bluntly, MAGA conservatives, who aren't heartless one-percenters, suck at all 4 of those. Then there are what I like to call the dancers trio, because they indicate that dancers might be the most underappreciated intellectual talents in our society. In order to be exceptional at dancing, one must have high IQs in all 3 of these intelligences.
True.
Kinesthetic intelligence is athletic talent, which is eye-hand and eye-foot coordination. Spatial intelligence is somewhat related to kinesthetic because athletes' vision of the field or court is incredibly important, but it's easier to see in someone when you see them play a spatially based game like checkers, chess, or backgammon, or even little things like putting groceries away or packing a bag. And then there's the best spatial intelligence test, of course, Tetris. Another intelligence related to our physical existence is musical intelligence, which appears in people's natural sense of rhythm.
Me?
Dancers use their natural athletic talent to interact with space in a very specific way while maintaining perfect rhythm. Kinesthetic, spatial, musical, the dancers trio. How's that for a retention device? Second.
That makes sense. You hear it, folks? Dancers are the most intelligent among us. The musical one especially makes sense. I literally got 2 guitars sitting next to me right now.
The last might be the most unexpected form of intelligence, natural intelligence, which is revealed when someone interacts with a dog, cat, or any other living thing in nature. Not everyone can play with a dog or be patient with earning a cat's trust. I know it's hard to believe, but it's true. Finally, the most important intelligence relevant to understanding the
I don't really trust people like that. Like, I have a cat, but like people that don't don't respect the boundaries of a cat because it's not a dog. Like, I think cats teach people a lot about consent. I think that's a big thing about cats because like dumber people will get like dogs because like they think they can just order it around or it's just it's a dog, like it can take care of itself. Nah, I think dogs take a whole lot more like effort and actually like training and giving attention and whatnot. Cats, you can just let them do whatever the fuck they want, but just don't fuck with them. It's a very simple concept, and that's like the difference between the two. The difference between the two animals actually says a whole lot. Like for people that choose to have them as pets as well. But I digress.
Conservative cognition of MAGA Americans is existential intelligence. Some Americans, many Americans, definitely most conservative Americans, would rather have someone higher up in our society's social hierarchy tell them what to think when it comes to big questions, such as, why are we here? What should I do with my life? And perhaps the biggest driving force in all of organized religion.
I am so grateful that I got over that, like, really quickly growing up. Like, I never felt the need to, like, have someone above me teach me or tell me what to think, what to do, how to think, and all that. Like, yeah.
And what happens to us when we die? Pondering such
Big
questions
question
produces what I would call spiritual stress. And if you're neither spiritual nor thoughtful, that kind of stress feels very scary. Now you might be thinking, well, don't these people realize?
Yeah, I appreciate that, Deter. Yeah, no, cats do teach people a whole lot about consent, like for sure. Yeah, you can tell a lot about people by the kind of pets they own too, and the way that they treat their pets, big time.
Is that there is an option of neither spiritual nor thoughtful. That kind of stress feels very scary. Now you might be thinking, well, don't these people realize that there is an option of simply accepting that some, if not all of these questions are impossible to answer with any degree of certainty? Yep. MAGA Americans, really any kind of conservative, don't do well with uncertainty. Since they are preoccupied with surviving the world as opposed to exploring the world, they want to be certain that what they are doing with their lives.
If that doesn't, sorry, I'm streaming. If that doesn't describe, like, especially MAGA conservatives in a nutshell, it's literally just like every day is a do or die thing. That's why they're so wrapped up in conspiracy theories. It's like, it's a survivor mentality. It's it is crazy how common that is. It's like you live in fear every single day, so your only instinct is just survive each day rather than like let shit go. Like be an explorer type. Like get over your fears of everything. Like that is such a brilliant take on it too. Like people who are a lot more explorer-minded don't let themselves get wrapped up in like irrational fears or conspiracism or shit like that.
Feels right. And having their preacher give them certainty that they're actually going to get what they want in the next life by doing what God tells them to do in this life helps them cope tremendously with the implicit message of the American conservative gospel, which is that real American Christians damn sure don't get what they want in this life. They get what God wants to give them, his plan for you, his expectations of you. Pray for what you want, but be grateful for what you get. Don't question God's will, just accept it.
I swear, like, okay, so I'm an atheist, and I have been since, I guess, 2012 when I was 17. Roughly. I mean, maybe 2013, but it was around that time, like the end of high school, where I realized, yeah, there's no God. Like, and religion is literally just a centuries old scheme to control the minds of the population and populations in general. Like, it's easy to fool, like, the peasantry, the weak-minded, because they don't know any better. They don't know how the universe works. So if you can fool them with a bit of like superstition or, you know, like spiritual, whatever, you know, like it claim that it's the doing of a god, you have a religion. Like it's so simple if you just sit and think about it for just a couple minutes.
Ironic, isn't it, that white Christian conservatives have faith in God's existence, plan, and sense of fairness
Yep.
because they have no faith in their own individual ability to discover life's purpose on their own.
It's sad.
According to the gospel as I understand it, God gave humanity free will to explore life's purpose, albeit spiritually holding the hand of Christ, but exploration nonetheless. If you want to be perfect, go. Sell your possessions and give to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven. Then come, follow me.
I think it's really funny hearing the stories about, like, true believers, the truest of believers, that literally sell everything they have, like their house, their car, their home, all their belongings, because they're that convinced that the rapture is just around the corner. And then it doesn't come, and they're destitute and homeless and have nothing. It's crazy how sucked in some people get into these cults.
Matthew 19:21. To all the conservative Bible beaters who might be watching right now, I want to enlighten you as to what is the central value of the right-wing American gospel. It's ironic that it's not so different than Islam's, which, for those of you who don't already know, translates to submission. The message of
Hippies in general, I agree, Deter. Yeah.
conservative capital, no, it's ironic that it's not so different than Islam's, which, for those of you who don't already know, translates to submission. The message of conservative capitalist Christianity in America might be salvation, but its purpose is subjugation.
Yep.
The message is your earthly existence isn't about your will. Your earthly existence is about God's will. So listen up to the guilt-ridden, self-righteous Sunday sermon if you want to be certain you know what God's will is. You sure as hell aren't going to be able to figure it out on your own.
It looks like Joe Rogan.
Frank Schaeffer, a profoundly
Is that Joe
thoughtful
Rogan?
progressive.
Is that? That's got to be Joe Rogan.
Frank Schaeffer, a profoundly thoughtful progressive with family ties to Billy Graham's golden age of evangelical America, accurately labels intolerant Christian conservatives as certainty addicts. They don't want to reason their way through these existential questions because that particular process of reasoning is stress-inducing, much like sober life is stress-inducing for an alcoholic or drug addict.
Yeah.
Yet they still want the answers to these questions for a variety of reasons, not the least of which is...
That is like the funniest title for a book. Why I Am an Atheist Who Believes in God. Like, what exactly...
Family ties to Billy Graham's golden age of evangelical America accurately labels intolerant Christian conservatives as certainty addicts. They don't want to reason their way through these existential questions because that particular process of reasoning is stress-inducing.
Yeah, no, if you're not certain about something, like I can't stand people who are so afraid to say I don't know. Like, one of the last jobs I had before I switched to my current ones right now, I worked at the pipe and supply place, and the office manager of the place, was so convinced that there was a God and that everything that he did was justified because eventually he was going to go to heaven and meet him. And it didn't matter that he treated the warehouse manager like crap or looked down on the other employees and whatnot, because he was just this smiley, bubbly guy who had a very twisted view of labor. And, you know, God is real because I say he is. It's gross how these people are.
Much like sober life is stress-inducing for an alcoholic or drug addict. Yet they still want the answers to these questions for a variety of reasons, not the least of which is conservatives don't want to sound less intelligent than educated and enlightened leftists who have actually mulled these big questions and come up with answers on their own. Or,
which is why conservatives and Christians always lose debates.
The most mature perspective made peace with not being able to answer them.
Yes, the smartest Christians and the smartest conservatives figure out that you do not debate your positions and your beliefs with people who actually have the arguments to deconstruct them and debunk and refute each and every one of them.
Consistent with the sports team metaphor for understanding MAGA Americans.
No, that wasn't Rogan? Okay. Chief is a brilliant guy. Vanguard's had him on once. Oh, really? I'll have to check him out. Like, that's definitely a brilliant title for a book.
Says nothing more than losers who want to feel like winners. Sports team metaphor, being able to answer them. Consistent with the sports team metaphor for understanding MAGA Americans as nothing more than losers who want to feel like winners without having to risk anything, MAGA Americans want intellectual respect without having to do the reading, thinking, or even the arguing themselves. You see, the jocks and cheerleaders were at the cool kids table at the cafeteria in high school, but when everyone grows up, the metaphorical cool kids table belongs to the more interesting, intelligent, and accomplished classmates. Because of their lack of education and life experience, which leads to them being intellectually reliant on Christian dogma, conservatives don't have much to offer these existential conversations. Yet they still want to participate because their competitiveness makes them intellectually insecure. And they don't want to accept the ugly, uncomfortable truth that they're simply not as thoughtful or open-minded as their peers who took learning seriously.
God, just fucking hammer, nail.
You've probably heard wannabe intellectuals whine about their right to an opinion when they're cornered in a debate with someone who has a higher existential IQ than they do. That is the ultimate sign of intellectual cowardice. Refusing to admit you're wrong or don't know something by claiming victim. I wish I could convince conservatives that it takes courage to admit you're wrong. It takes courage to admit you don't know something. This know-it-all culture brought about by the ubiquitous availability of information, the internet, is miserable. No one knows everything. No one should have an opinion on everything. That's why we have experts. When confronted by a hot issue like abortion, a MAGA American's mind might go something like, what am I supposed to think about a woman's right to choose? I sure as hell ain't gonna listen to these purple-hair feminazi weirdos who are in my face about it. What did Jesus say about abortion? Wait a minute. To find that out, I'd have to read the Bible. I don't want to read the Bible. That would be too hard. I probably wouldn't get to listen to the story anyway.
That's a great picture. Covered in dust. The Bible kind of condones abortion. Fun fact.
If I can even read in the first place. I know, I'll just ask my preacher what the Bible says about abortion. Oh, he says vote Republican or you're a baby killer. That sure was easy. That sure feels right. Certainty-addicted MAGA Americans worship three
they just dust their hands like that's all they need. They need to just shut your mind off from the issue and just like reject any and all arguments to the contrary. Yep.
Sociocultural touch points, or as I like to call them, three false gods of conservative citizenry in their pursuit of answering the tough existential questions of American life. The Constitution, the unregulated free market, the uniform. How we should organize our society according to shared resources and basic needs, how we should do business with each other, and how we should protect each other. You'll notice these three panaceas of Americana directly derived from my fourth Deter three, the three major rhetorical anchors of conservative culture: the past, the self, the fight. The Constitution is the past, the unregulated free market is the self, and the uniform is the fight. All three are what I like to call panacea plays, which I'll define right now as rhetorical references to sources of intellectual or social authority, usually irrelevant to the issue at hand, to dismiss valid counterarguments. Panacea plays are nothing more than examples of the red herring logical fallacy appeals to authority. For example, whenever you hear someone describe themselves as a strict constitutionalist, get the hell out of there because they're probably strapped. But seriously, strict constitutionalists invoke the Constitution and the framers when arguing about issues such as the First Amendment and media law, or the Second Amendment and gun regulations, because they think if the Constitution addresses it, there is no counterargument to be had. That's it. Case closed. We don't have to think about it anymore. The framers gave us the answer. Just like our mommies and daddies gave us the answers to life's tough questions.
Yeah, it's literally like I was just saying. Like, you hear one thing that confirms your biases, and that is your rigid belief, unimpeded for your whole life. Unless you're like shaken to the core of that belief, you're basically poisoned with it.
Even if mommy and daddy didn't have a clue as to what the hell they were talking about, but it felt good.
I do want to ask, Deter, do you think that the Constitution is a living document? I mean, it's kind of like an obvious question because, duh, you can amend it. Like, I basically just answered my own question. Like, you can amend the Constitution. I do think it should be a whole lot easier, though. I think it's like 2/3 of the Senate and the House need to vote, like, to amend it. Yeah, absolutely, a living document. Yeah, obviously, yeah. Okay, well, for sure.
To have someone we love, trust, and respect give us what we want: the comfort of certainty.
Yeah. A second in German. Gotcha. Yeah. I mean, it's so funny. I mean, the reason I bring it up is because the Constitution is harped on constantly, all the friggin' time by conservatives. But without realizing, like, we can literally just amend it to fit, like, current social issues, because a lot of shit's not relevant anymore. Like a lot of conservatives are like, oh, well, I mean, obviously, like, the First and Second Amendment are the most important because they came first and they came second. And it's like, well, what's the Third Amendment? Just how important is that one? I'd argue the Fourth and Fifth are, like, far more relevant, far more important, but they came afterwards. It's like, so it's just a dumb argument on its face. Like, who cares if it's the first and second? Like, anyway, I digress. Let's continue.
Wait a second, Mom and Dad. The Second Amendment says something about guns being used for a regulated militia. What does regulated mean?
Ooh,
unlike MAGA America.
And they for people who generally openly constantly talk about how much they hate regulations. What does the Second Amendment say? Well-regulated militia. Seems a little contradictory. That's a fly in the soup if I've ever... how's that for a metaphor?
Dad, the Second Amendment says something about guns being used for a regulated militia. What does regulated mean? Unlike MAGA Americans today, the framers were men of their time. Most of the signatures on the Declaration of Independence belong to slave owners. Let's be real, the framers created the country by and large because they were the wealthiest members of the emerging American society and they didn't want to pay their damn taxes. I know there's more to it than that, but come on, that's the version of the story that runs parallel to American conservative culture. With that said, however ignorant and entitled the framers' privilege made them, the big names were brilliant with respect to structuring a government. So brilliant, in fact, that they incorporated the aforementioned Socratic understanding of wisdom as an acknowledgement of ignorance into the Constitution. With the amendment process, the framers knew times would change, and there was no way for them to know how.
Yeah, I actually fully agree with that. Like, the founders were actually very smart and knew how to put a government together. Like, it's actually kind of brilliant. I actually really like the work of Thomas Paine myself.
They entrusted us, future generations, with updating the document over time so that present-day problems could be solved by a modern system of government.
Yep.
Much like good parents doing the best they can to educate and provide for their kids until the kids can provide for themselves, the framers gave us the best intellectual framework they could come up with for organizing a society. But they were humble enough to know that all it was their best effort. It might be hard to think of such men as humble, but trust me, humility is one of the better WASP qualities that the framers, all of whom were WASPs, possessed, lived, or at least tried to live. They didn't want us to worship them as demigods of democracy. They didn't want us to consider the Constitution the end-all and be-all document that defines American democracy in such concrete terms that no generation should ever challenge its conservative interpretations.
And they didn't want multiple parties. They didn't want, like, factions to break off. Like, like George Washington himself, like had dire warnings. Do not create a two-party system. Do not break off. It should be one party. Yeah.
They wanted us to think and act for ourselves within the structure of political power they created. And even if I'm wrong, even if they did think of themselves as godlike, to hell with how these ancient, rich white men may or may not have applied the values of the Constitution onto present-day problems such as gun control. The framers could never have even conceived of a world without slavery, much less a world with planes, trains, automobiles, nuclear weapons, the internet, and perhaps the framers' most relevant ignorance, an interdependent global economy, also known as the global village for all you students of Marshall McLuhan in the audience. The framers have been dead for 2 centuries, a reminder of how young our country is.
To even predict this,
their words have outlived them and will outlive us. But speculations about their will with respect to today's issues are not only irrelevant, they are distracting and, by extension, counterproductive to discussions about how our country should be run today. Don't suffer fools who worship the words of the Constitution as if they are the gospel of Western democracy. They are not. The Constitution is a flawed document written by flawed men. That's not a judgment of the framers' quality. That is an acknowledgement of their limitations as human beings of the late 18th century. If you do respect them as intellectual visionaries of democracy and of their time, as I do, you'll understand that they would want us to acknowledge their intellectual limitations by embracing both individual and collective decision-making according to present-day values built upon their system of government. Some might describe what I just described as self-government. The framers became giants of global society by founding America, but they knew that over time they would become small with respect to the history of the world. Aside from a handful of them, their names would fade and their system of government would be all that's left of their legacies, thus making us their legacy. Let's grow up. Take responsibility for our lives and our country by acknowledging the Constitution for what it is, an empowering document, not an inhibiting one. This example of strict constitutionalism is an example of another left versus right Deter dichotomy: collaboration versus competition. Open-minded lefties see the system of democracy the framers created as one that provides opportunities for collaboration by public servants of various political persuasions to solve the problems of the public. MAGA Americans don't even see the system of government because they can't see past perhaps the most effective element of the right-wing media's magic trick: cultural symbols of authority anti-intellectual conservatives can use to own the libs.
Yep.
All comes down to competition, don't forget. Conservative
Always.
media...
Yeah, they're just trying to, like, out-trigger, like, their, like, other conservatives, like out-trigger the libs. It's insane. It is all literally just so rooted in competition. Like, it's gross.
Spoon feeds MAGA buzzwords, sensational anecdotes, and misinformation of all kinds to convince them that they have nothing to learn from anyone that's not telling them exactly what they want to hear.
Bingo.
Within the context of America's conservative media outlets and personalities, the culture war drives the American public toward tribalism.
Yep.
By encouraging competition between subcultures as opposed to communal collaboration.
God, if that's not like the most accurate representation, especially of like the online left, tankies versus ANCOMs versus Marxist-Leninists versus progressives versus liberals versus, God, what else? Anarchists versus libertarians versus... If it goes on and on.
Where citizens work together for the collective good.
Please.
Obama articulated this cultural disparity well when he said, to conservatives, you're on your own. To us, we're in this together. Collaboration stands no chance of efficacy if competition...
I will give Obama that. Like, he really knew, like, just how to get under the skin of conservatives while being, like, just, like, the biggest centrists in the friggin' world.
Competition is introduced to the communication surrounding how to serve the country's citizens. This is another specific explanation for why conservatives suck at creativity. They're so concerned with winning that discussions can't help but become arguments.
Yeah, no kidding. Have you seen, has anyone here seen their creative endeavors when it comes to making propaganda for, like, children? Like, look at PragerU. Look at how piss poor, like, their, for lack of a better word, artistic side is. It's vile. It's disgusting. It's
a contest between sand and water, where sand is collaborative creativity and water is individual competition. Build a sandcastle, then throw a cup of water onto it. Within the context of public service, that kind of intellectual destruction is not a form of creation, it's intellectual abortion. And social progress is the zygote. Derivative of the self-rhetorical anchor of conservative culture, the unregulated free market is our second false god of conservative citizenry. MAGA Americans worship the ghosts of the framers at the altar of the unregulated free market. Not just any market, an unregulated free market, essentially laissez-faire economics.
Yep.
Unless, of course, an industry giant is going to go bankrupt or a plethora of powerful clients will lose their money if a banking institution is allowed to fail. In those cases, the government will step in and socialize losses with yet another corporate bailout. To be fair, both Republicans and Democrats are guilty of those mistakes.
Absolutely. Privatize the gains, socialize the losses. It's all one big giant motherfucking scam.
Crisis scenarios aside, MAGA's unregulated free market false god is defined by the following tenets of absolutism. All deregulation is good deregulation, tax cuts are always good, and priority should be given to one percenters and corporations. Labor should not be allowed to organize because that would impede the efficiency of the market. The natural environment is just another cost of doing business in a 21st century capitalist economy. Foreign interventionism to benefit American corporate interests abroad is not only acceptable, it should be encouraged. The list goes on, but those are the big ones.
Imperialism.
The mammons of this false god, this tempting rhetorical panacea play, are unsurprisingly billionaires, particularly tech entrepreneurs and Fortune 500 CEOs.
Yep.
According to MAGA Americans' favorite oversimplification, Understanding American capitalism as a meritocracy, billionaires and CEOs are wealthier than the rest of us because they deserve to be. They simply worked harder and or are smarter than the rest of us. So when they speak, we should really listen, because their opinions on the system that made them rich aren't biased at all. Remember when MAGA Americans thought Trump would be a good president because he'd run the government like a business? Well, if Trump's presidential business goal was to hook up the heartless 1%ers at the expense of the remaining 99%, job well done, Donald. MAGA Americans' faith in A-list public figures of capitalism should remind you of my very first Deter decree, individualism versus collectivism. CEOs and billionaires are masters of self-interest, their individual wants, wishes, and needs. Their interest in the success of their companies is not a collective purpose. It is an extension of their self-interest.
Yep.
That's why executives get stock options. Public servants, however, notice I didn't say politicians, are masters of collective interest. Who do you think we should listen to when it comes to issues such as income inequality, environmental protection, and healthcare? Someone who has benefited from the status quo? Or someone who is trying to upend the status quo because they recognize it's not working for the working class?
Yeah.
Elon Musk is an example from current events that proves the absurdity of the suggestion that billionaires are good at everything and know everything. That crazy mofo may walk the line between genius and insanity, but the latter outweighs the former when it comes to Musk's social media swing and a miss.
Yeah.
The thrice married father of 9 knows engineering, automation, and how to ride a wave of private sector change to make a fortune. But
does he really have 9 kids? That's insane. I didn't know that. Holy shit. Yeah, no, fuck Elon Musk. He ruined Twitter. Twitter's basically unusable unless you have a blue check. It's fucked.
Based on Twitter's performance, now X, since he took over, you can't say he knows much about monetizing his favorite way to feel famous.
Yeah, no, seriously. If you look like in him, just like any other billionaire, just riddled with insecurity, like just diseased with insecurity. Look at any like offhand reports of like staff members or his people who have worked like with him on like pretty much anything. He really, really cares about his image. He cares about being liked, like to a sad degree. Like, it's bad.
Think about the sequence of events real quick. Why did Twitter just accept Musk's initial offer? $44 billion. Yes, that works. No immediate rejection like many expected. No real negotiation. Not even a respectful counteroffer to see if Musk would throw in an extra $1 billion.
Because that's a shitload of money for a company that's not even worth that much, like, to begin with. Like, wasn't it worth, like, wasn't Musk's offer, like, 3 or 4 times more than the company was actually, like, worth to begin with? Like, that's, like, obviously, yeah, they're going to take that kind of money. Like, because Elon Musk is a fucking chump.
Just 11 days of hinting that Twitter might make a poison pill play, only to accept Musk's $44 billion. Why? Because Twitter brass knew the company wasn't worth that much and would not grow to become worth that much anytime soon.
Bingo.
They probably could have squeezed him for at least another $1 billion, but Musk's offer was pretty much top dollar. Way above market, and according to basic capitalist analysis, foolish not to accept.
Yep.
Net present value, baby. Twitter's current problems following Musk's takeover prove the truth of my 7th Deter decree. Just because someone is the best or among the best at what they do doesn't mean they're good at anything else, much less everything else.
No kidding. Like, how many failed projects does fucking Elon Musk have his name attached to at this point?
Ronald Reagan set the stage for the Mammon complex by starting his presidency with a false proclamation disguised as profound insight into Cold War capitalism. You know where I'm going. Government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem. Oh,
I'm glad Reagan's dead.
sounds so good, doesn't it? For successful conservatives, Reagan's legendary catchphrase justifies their greed by vindicating their competitive worldview as the best way to live in American life, because they did what they had to do to win. And when they did, goddammit. What would become the most prolific conservative cliche of all time, however, tragically manipulates unsuccessful conservatives into thinking they need to accept what conservative capitalism gives them. Much like the aforementioned teachings of conservative Christianity, that an individual's will is trumped by God's will. By providing unsuccessful or even just less successful conservatives with the excuse of the government inhibiting their upward mobility, the right-wing media machine implicitly encourages them to avoid individual responsibility.
It's a self-fulfilling prophecy too. If you're conservative, if you're in the Republican Party, you're in power, and you have more authority over the government and the way the government functions, and you, with your power, continue to chip away at the power of the government and what the government does for people, and just continuously make things worse and worse for people who rely on the government for infrastructure or a social safety net or any sort of programs, or social services or what have you, then you can then point at the government as being feckless, ineffective, not taking care of problems, not having any actual solutions, despite the fact that conservatives were responsible for the government failures in the first place.
They think to themselves, I would be successful if the government would just get off my back. If a Democrat is president, frustrated white Trumplicans will blame him for their problems.
And then they turn around and go like, oh, you want to solve these issues that the government's not fulfilling? Cut taxes. And who do those tax cuts go to? Not you.
If a Republican is president, Trumplicans will blame Democrats for getting in the way of the White House. Regardless of who's in charge, the white MAGA douchebag stays in the same place because he's too much of a coward to risk being wrong. The third and final false god of conservative citizenry is the uniform. Derivative of conservative culture's the fight rhetorical anchor. The Army has fatigues. The Navy has whites. Cops have hats, badges, and holstered guns. The purported purpose of these and other uniformed public servants, such as immigration officers, is protection. We are told that our society would neither exist nor function without them. Now, I don't know if that's true, and no one can, but what I do know is that according to conservatives' culture of blind faith patriotism, these uniformed figures deserve credit for carrying a burden of social responsibility so heavy that they always deserve the benefit of the doubt when accused of negligence.
For real. Yeah. The purpose of the police is not to protect you, it's not to serve you, it's to protect property and serve capital. They are revenue generators. What do you think? What do you think tickets are? What do you think fines and fees are? And if you're rich enough, it's nothing to you. You can pay for it.
They are risking their lives, after all, even though most aren't, to keep us safe.
Exactly.
So don't disrespect them by questioning their methods.
Right. Don't
challenge the badge. We call it a shield for a reason. For example, according to the one and only Ben Shapiro, Derek Chauvin did not murder George Floyd according to the letter of the law.
Oh, God.
I thought only God has a right to take life, Ben. Well, let me tell you something, little man. If God does exist, he definitely doesn't wear a uniform, and neither do his angels. The men and women in blue are only the most visibly ubiquitous uniform in our society today, though. American exceptionalism as a concept was introduced in the 1920s, but it gained a foothold in global culture within, not surprising, a military context, specifically the Allies' victory in World War II, which produced the label the Greatest Generation. Now, without tripping down a World War II rabbit hole, historically speaking, Hiroshima and Nagasaki made our ascension in geopolitical status superlative, scary, and righteously patriotic all at the same time.
Yeah.
Casualty estimates for an invasion of Japan were in the millions. I have no doubt that many, if not most American families, particularly those with healthy young men, reacted to the advent of nuclear war with gratitude, because they didn't see it as the beginning of something new and scary. They saw it as the end of something old. The end of old world imperialism, to be specific, brought about with an unprecedented level of finality.
Damn.
Quick tangent. Whenever the subject of World War II comes up in conversation,
true.
I want you to ask the room, do you know what the casualties were for the US versus the Soviet Union? The answer is roughly 500,000 for the US and somewhere between 23 and 27 million for the Soviets.
That is
The large
unfathomable to think about, and I forget about that sometimes. That is absolutely insane.
largest estimated ratio for US deaths to Soviet deaths in World War II is 70 Soviets for every 1 American.
Fuck.
Whatever notions narcissistic patriots have about the contributions America made to the Allies winning World War II, the historical truth is that our contributions to the European theater on the Western Front were significant, but not superlative. The biggest reason Hitler lost was his obsession with beating Mother Russia in the Eastern Front.
Yep.
While FDR was sending materials, weapons, and as much support as he could to Churchill before the U.S. entered the war, Stalin's officers were shooting their own soldiers to keep them from fleeing battle. It's dark. In order to empathize with Americans who lived through World War II and were old enough to remember early August 1945, you have to understand that up until that point, global history had been defined by imperialistic warfare. Independent economies competing over resources, very often escalating to military conflict. At the time, there's no way the American public could have foreseen how nuclear weapons would produce the Cold War and how that conflict would hinder global progress for the next generation or 2 or 5. After Truman ended the last great war of explicit imperialism with Fat Man and Little Boy, I have to suspect that most Americans felt relief that the war was finally over on all fronts, that the Allies won, and that no one else they knew would be either shipping out to die or coming home dead or injured. Most concerns about the new doomsday weapon introduced to geopolitics were likely brushed aside with thoughts deriving from the foundations of American exceptionalism. Sure, the nuke is scary, but it's our nuke, so no worries. The military uniforms that remind us of U.S. victories in foreign wars carry more cultural weight than do their domestic cousins of law enforcement because of the team pride understanding of American patriotism. We're all kind of on the same team when it comes to the U.S. Army, but not at all when it comes to John Law. Cops now signify domestic division, while the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, etc., all signify a righteous, united defense of democracy.
Quick little side question, I guess. Did you see Oppenheimer in theater? Did you get a chance to see that in theaters or recently?
I'd call that the pop culture perception assessment of how cops compare to soldiers in Trump-era America. Cops are now decidedly controversial in public discourse, whereas we still see military service members as young kids giving the best years of their lives to their country so that we citizens can sleep better at night. In truth, most of them are serving because they don't have a whole lot of better options.
I think you really like it. If you're a World War II buff, I think you really, really enjoy it. It's actually a very, very, very well put together movie.
But they are serving nonetheless. So let's respect that service by respecting and honoring them without worshiping them. or the causes they serve.
Yeah, ACAB. That's where I stand.
Strict constitutionalism has the framers. The unregulated free market has billionaires and CEOs. The uniform has cops and soldiers, but it also has judges and preachers, because the robes they wear are most certainly uniforms representing teams. The teams of law and order.
Yeah.
To conservatives, judges are masters of law, while preachers are masters of order, social and spiritual order. Once again, we know Trumplicans have a very low existential IQ.
Sickening.
So when they are faced with questions such as, how should we organize a society according to right and wrong, they rely on these lofty authority figures to provide answers that relieve spiritual stress.
Yeah, Nolan's great.
Trump Republicans don't like all judges, they like Trump judges. Politicized Christians don't like all preachers, they like politicized preachers.
God.
If you'd like to Google Justice Amy Coney Barrett and televangelist Paula White, those two charlatans epitomize the Christianized public servant and the conservative cultural crusader, respectively. Check them out. Within the rhetorical context of the unholy marriage between capitalism and politicized Christianity, American capitalism is the metaphorical father. The unregulated free market is the son, and money is the Holy Spirit. The framers are demigods, billionaires, CEOs, judges, and politicized preachers are archangels, and cops, soldiers, and suits are angels. The stratospheric social status of these figures within the context of a waspy culture of competitiveness gives conservatives the ultimate intellectual cop-out because it yields superlative certainty. White conservative certainty addicts can't know for sure what the framers would think of today's society, but they can vote for politicians who promise to appoint strict constitutionalist judges.
And it's scary how, the whole thing functions too. What you call true believers that literally just go by doctrine and can't be swayed either way. Like, their ideology is so unabashed with certainty. That's why the 3 conservative Supreme Court justices being appointed was such a big deal because of everything that Deter's saying right here.
White conservative certainty addicts can't acknowledge the importance of regulating a capitalist economy, but they can envy billionaires to the extent of electing one president. White conservative certainty addicts can't fathom that a significant number of cops are power-hungry bullies looking for a fight.
Yep.
Or that a lot of soldiers are lost souls with no other choice but to serve. But they can vote for more militarization of our police force and more foreign wars for our military to wage or at least prepare for. Just as my 3 false gods of conservative citizenry possess at least one of the qualities of my 3 major rhetorical anchors of conservative culture, you may have already thought of examples of right-wing media outlets and personalities using these distraction tactics, the delivery of which is defined in my previous episode as Deter's 3 stages of influence: attention, point of view, point. My 3 false gods are nothing more than specific examples of cultural touch points the right uses to grab the American public's attention by invoking the fallacy of authority to manipulate citizens into voting for the GOP. Consistent with the conservatives' narcissistic patriotism, these 3 false gods imply that if you do not agree with strict interpretations of the Constitution, deregulation of the market, and putting cops, soldiers, and judges and preachers on a societal pedestal, you're simply not as American as conservative Americans.
Yeah, it's disgusting, and the fact that these figures are even put on pedestals to begin with, no, they're just there for obviously the concept of justice and having a justice system is important, but to hyper focus on these figures to the point where they become politicized or romanticized even is disgusting. I don't have any other words for it.
Right-wing media outlets and personalities grab your attention with the false god, invoke the patriotic point of view, then deliver the implicit point. If you want to feel like this country belongs to you more than it does those who are different from you, commit to conservatism.
God, it's all a power
In terms
trip.
of evaluating their cognition in a useful way, the specific criticism that explains the intellectual weakness of conservatism is that conservative cognition doesn't take what I'll simply call the second step of analytical thinking, also known as critical thinking. Take crime as an easy example. The Trumplican thinks criminals break the law, ergo they are bad people and should be removed from society until they are no longer a danger to others. Rather than the thoughtful lefty who deduces criminals are desperate people trying to survive in a brutally unfair competitive socioeconomic system. Ergo, we, as fellow citizens, have an obligation to provide a social safety net because their desperation derives from a system over which we preside.
Exactly.
This is the difference between right-wing, self-serving, superficial reasoning and left-wing, intellectually responsible reasoning.
Yes.
Trump has said it himself. He has an initial
That's exactly it.
Trump has said it himself. He has an initial instinctual reaction to scenarios, then follows that, like every time. Why do you think his entire brand is shameless and relentless self-promotion? Because everyone's first instinct is to take care of themselves, and neither he nor his followers ever transcend that selfish individualism.
That's exactly it. And you could, like, he's literally his own lawyers, his own team, his own cabinet, like all the members, like everybody who's around him who are now facing like criminal proceedings or being called to testify or as witnesses and stuff. None of them are being paid. None of them have been getting paid, so they're all turning on him because he put himself first every step of the way. It's all he's ever cared about. It's like it like magic, like it's magical. It's beautiful to see. Like it's like it's poetic. That's a good way to put it, I suppose. I'm looking for words. My brain's not working right now.
They never take that second step of reasoning to evolve their citizenship from the childish ignorance endowed to them by their parents to mature cognizance earned through exploratory life experience.
Yeah.
So, are Trumplicans stupid, stubborn, sociopathic, or just simply ignorant for thinking this way? Is their self-serving, superficial cognition excusable by the implications of my first two Deter decrees? We are all prisoners of our own personal experience. And just because someone looks like an adult doesn't mean they are one.
Yep.
Or do they merit a majority of the blame for the current condition of the country? Because they are legally adults, after all, even if they have the minds of children and said life experience is limited. While we have thus far addressed myriad questions about how MAGA Americans think, we have only implicitly addressed what MAGA Americans are, their identity, or perhaps more accurately, their identities. Yes, Trump's base is predominantly rural and educated whites, but are they an evil cohort constituting an existential threat to American democracy? If you ask them what they stand for individually as Americans, what would they say? The South will rise again? America is a Christian nation? I'm entitled to a weapon of war. In keeping with my sixth Deter decree, when examining a public problem, look at the whole picture, not just the parts that make you feel right, because the parts that make you feel wrong require society's attention much more than their easy, comfortable, bias-confirming counterparts.
God, that's so true.
I suggest we complete this judgment of Trumplican citizenship by identifying the subcultures within the subculture of conservative America.
But for crying out loud, for crying out loud, if it feels wrong, perhaps it should be addressed. Like, don't cower away and just ignore it.
To foreshadow my insight, most Trumplicans are members of all three tribes within the tribe of Trump trash. I hope the next time you stumble onto one of these three false gods of conservative citizenry on a media outlet or in a casual conversation, you'll be able to expose these panacea plays as cheap, rhetorical parlor tricks so that everyone present can take that second step of analytical thinking to discover conservative capitalist cognition is counterproductive to building an American society better than the one we have today. If you found this analysis sapient, please like, share, and subscribe to help grow the show.
Excellent.
Comments particularly help with the algorithm.
Another excellent
Thank you for
video.
your attention and patience, and never forget to remind your fellow citizens that you don't get change in America by asking nicely.
Yes. All right. Very well done. Very well done. Oops. Yeah. I enjoyed that quite a bit. That was brilliant, just like the other videos. Deter, you did a good job with that one. I will say, like, maybe it's just like my exhaustion and whatnot. It is a lot to take in for one video. A lot of intellectualism, I guess you could say, crammed into one thing for me to process fully. One thing I will say is that these videos do require at least a couple watches, you know, a couple views to actually like absorb all the information, which is pretty friggin' indispensable, especially with the topics that you are going over, basically. The decrees, the dichotomies, it really is, like, in order to grasp, like, just an understanding, it is like crucial to understand, and it's very useful tools, very useful information, obviously. So a little bit long-winded, could maybe like be taken apart just a little bit, but still very excellent. You say you're working on another one really soon. I'm looking forward to it. I really am. But yeah, you're very welcome, dude. Yeah. No, I understand. Like, something like this would take a lot of work. That's why I rarely ever make videos anymore. Like, I made one video that was almost 2 hours long on Jimmy Dore, and that thing took like a month. And like, it just the thought of doing videos like that to me is it's just exhausting. But yeah, they're thick. Love it. Yeah. The structure's good. The structure's good. The only thing is, if you're doing like post-production and whatnot, the audio's got to be boosted like 20-25 decibels. It's got to be turned up a little bit. But other than that, yeah, what you got right here is good. I wish you had a whole lot more exposure. And you know, even though like I'm small, I'm tiny, like I don't have much to work with here, but whatever I can do to help boost that, like I'll try my best. Like I just posted on Facebook, on Twitter, that I was live. This is going to be on my this is going to be pinned on my Twitter page for a minute. I'm going to reshare this down the line since it's a stream. It doesn't go in my videos tab on my channel. It goes in my live tab, so you can only see it that way. But I will make a post about this particular video down the line, and of course I'll reshare it too. I'll probably put it on my Instagram story as well, obviously. But yeah, these videos will be roughly 30 minutes or less. Excellent, awesome. I'm really looking forward to it, dude. Yeah, thanks for confiding in me about your content, because like I truly value it, and I hope it gets a whole lot more exposure. But yeah, the foundation that supposed to come further. Yes, cool. Yeah, I campaign season. Like, ooh, like it's hard to believe the election is like a year away now. Yeah. For the rest of you, if you're watching this and you don't know who Deter is, go ahead and subscribe to him. American Wasp with Deter McBizness. Check out his channel. Hit the bell on both of our channels so you don't miss future videos or future streams. I mean, I've only done like streaming lately. Like, I've been covering the Republican debates. But yeah, hope to see you guys all very soon. I'm not exactly sure what kind of thing I'll do next on this channel. Maybe it'll be the next Deter video. Maybe it'll be something regarding like Israel and Gaza. Who knows? But thanks for the few of you who tuned in, and the few of you that did the rewatch. Because obviously, like once the stream's done, it's going to be automatically posted. I am going to pass the hell out. We'll do a stream soon, maybe. The Newsom DeSantis debate. That'd be great if we could figure out like a duos thing or something like that. Covering that debate together, I think would be fun. I'm not exactly sure when that is. I think it's towards the end of the month. So yeah, I'll figure that out. But everybody have an excellent night. Deter, thanks for joining in. Look forward to the next video, dude.